Okay, so this is part 2 of our current event and weekly Bible study for October 14th, 2007. Just to let you know, I will be doing a dedicated study on Halloween, either next week or definitely before the 31st. So I think it's something I looked up on my teachings, and I didn't see anything dedicated to that. So I want to make sure I know there's one up there on Easter/Ishtar and Xmas. So I really think we need to put one up there on Halloween as well. But this particular one, which kind of relates to that, is entitled Witchcraft Practices Biblically Defined. What are witchcraft practices, and let's biblically define them. So I'm actually going to have a PDF file attachment with this particular sermon or teaching. And what you can do is print this PDF out prior to listening, so you can actually follow along if you want to, and all the scriptures are pretty much laid out here. Whereas the last one I just did on false prophets, that would have been a lot harder to do that on, because there were so many scriptures we got into. So whenever you see a PDF attached to a particular teaching, it's good if you can print the PDF out prior to hearing the teaching, if possible, because then you can follow along better. And then you'll also have the documentation that you can refer to later. So unless otherwise indicated, the definitions that are cited in this teaching are from the Noah Webster's 1828 dictionary, which defines the words more accurately for the dispensation of time that the King James Bible was written. See, vocabulary has changed, definitions many times have changed, and that's why I tend to use that Webster's 1828. Deuteronomy 18:9, the Lord speaking to the Jews. But again, these are things that are moral issues that would apply to us as much today as they would ever. When thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. Okay, now our nation right now is just, we're just one big abomination. Okay? There's probably no other nation on the face of the planet that if a Christian was moving into the United States, this verse would apply more. That's an indictment against all of America. And I think I remember in the previous teaching I had made reference to this thing that David Jeremiah was saying about how the churches have been put into this time that we're living in, and it's a very challenging time. And I thought to myself, no, the churches are the reason that it's gotten this bad, because the churches and the people in them are called to be salt and light. Salt, he made a good point. One grain of salt you can taste in your mouth. It doesn't take a lot of salt to make a difference, in other words. Only a pinch of salt in a recipe can make all the difference, right? Well, if you're salt and light, one tiny little cube of salt grain, you can actually taste that on your mouth. That means that a little bit of it can make a really, really big difference. Okay? In light, if you think about it, what is darkness? If you really think about the definition, all darkness is an absence of light. Because whenever light comes into a room, darkness flees. It has to. Darkness can't overtake light, but light can easily overtake darkness. It's just the nature of, I don't know, physics or whatever. We're called to be salt and light. But see, the churches dropped that ball. They have totally left the battlefield, essentially. They're part of the problem. They're yoked up with the state in so many ways, up with the government. And this government is going to eventually turn into the one world government. Okay, which the Bible clearly predicted would happen. There's going to be a one world religion, and it's no wonder that all these things are happening, because the Bible clearly predicted it was going to happen. It's going to be a one world religion, and it's no wonder. But see, because the church has left the battlefield is the reason that the abominations that are taking place in this country are happening to the extent they're happening, because the church should have been that salt and light, but it left the battlefield. It chose to be a hireling. It chose to go after filthy lucre and mammon. It chose to forsake the old paths. You could go on and on and on. Deuteronomy 18:10 then, the next verse says, there shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire. Now, passing through the fire, this particular section contains some stern admonitions against any indulgence in sorcery. Okay? Particularly, that's what we're talking about here today, witchcraft, biblically defined. The context indicates that the offering of a child is for the particular purpose of determining or discerning the course of events. This probably was the motivation behind the Moabite king's sacrifice of his sons in 2 Kings 3, 26 and 27. And we can actually go there. But when you talk about your son or daughter passing through the fire, essentially what that was particularly is when they took their sons and daughters and they sacrificed them to Moloch. Now, there were other deities that you could sacrifice your child to. Chemosh, Moloch, these types of deities. Baal, Moloch in particular, I know I've said this before, but I'll say it again, was a particular deity where the statue, because they always had to have some kind of statue to represent their god. They had eyes. The Bible says they have eyes, but they see not. They have ears, but they hear not. They have mouths, but they speak not. And those that worship them are like them. That's what the Bible says. They have eyes, but they don't see. See, if you think about it, if you worship some kind of stone statue, and that statue has eyes, but he sees not, he ears, but he hears not, and mouth, but he speaks, the Bible says they that worship them are like them. The very statues they're worshiping. They have eyes, but they don't see. Ears, but they don't hear. Okay? So, when they took their child as a sacrifice, and I think a lot of times it was the firstborn, they would heat the statue up. Actually, there were hands that came out from before them. They would heat the hands up to white hot, fire stoked under them, and the hands were, I believe, angled up slightly, so that when you put your baby on these white hot hands, and I can't even conceive of this, but obviously it would kill the baby, and the baby would roll in. The Moloch had an opening in his stomach, and the baby would roll into his stomach. I can't. I don't even like thinking about it. It's incomprehensible. It doesn't compute to me. I don't understand how somebody could do that to their child. And usually it was for monetary gain. I don't know. All I can say is that you've got to be really, really demon-possessed to the toenails to do something like that. If we go to 2 Kings 3:26, and I don't mean that in a judgmental way. It doesn't compute to me, and I don't think it would compute to really any parent. I can't even imagine what the price in hell these people are going to have to pay, because Jesus said it were better that a millstone were hung about your neck and you be cast in the midst of the sea than you offend one of these little ones that believeth in me. You don't mess with you don't do this stuff to little children, little babies. Your punishment's more severe. They can't defend themselves. We're going to talk a lot about this particular subject. So 2 Kings 3:26 says, And the king of Moab saw that the battle was sore for him. He took with him 700 men that drew swords to break through even unto the king of Edom, but they could not. Then he took his eldest son that should have reigned in his stead, and he offered him for a burnt offering upon the wall. He took his own son, who was going to be his successor, but he was so stinking self-centered that he said, well, maybe if I sacrifice the best thing I've got, I'll win. How self-centered is that? And how demon-possessed would you have to be to do something like that? And there was a great indignation against Israel, and they departed from him and returned to their own land. Wow. That's pretty bad. So that was when it says here, this context indicates the offering of a child is for a particular purpose of determining or discerning the course of events, or having a favorable outcome in this case. He did it so he'd win. Okay? But most of the time this was done for financial gain, sacrificing your children to Moloch. Now, Solomon erected things because these women that he was with, 700 concubines, 300 wives, took his heart away from the Lord, and he built altars and things like this to Moloch and Chemosh. I pray to God he didn't get into sacrificing his own sons. The Bible really doesn't indicate it. But